And we are live. Welcome, guys, to another live stream. And today's episode is going to be following up from the episode that we did yesterday, where we were basically talking about fractional reserve banking. So today's episode is for my real estate peoples. If you're in real estate, then this is the episode for you. So once again, if it is your first time on the channel, just do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. I mean, what does it cost you, right? It's cheap, it's free, right? You're not killing anybody by subscribing. So hit the subscribe button. Go ahead and like the video. Obviously, like the videos, go ahead and push us to the algorithm. So we're going to go ahead and get started today, guys. And to start us off, first off, remember yesterday, guys, we're talking about debt. We're talking about debt. We're talking about, is debt a good thing? You know what I mean? Debt. I know I have an accent, so D-E-B-T, debt. And we're talking about, is it a good thing? How do rich people use debt, right? And then we spoke about how you should be in business with the banks. And basically, to start us off today, I have my man, the one and only Robert Kiyosaki, who is in a short, basically, he's not here. And let's go ahead and let's take a listen to this.
Debt. Now, this is basic financial education or financial literacy, they call it. There's good debt and bad debt.
Okay.
Good debt is debt that somebody else pays off for you. So when I buy an apartment house with my friend Kenny, I don't pay for it. The bank lends us the money, and debt is tax-free, right? So let's say we put $1 billion down to buy a $5 million apartment house. So we now have a $5 million asset, and our tenants pay for this. That's good debt. But I take out my credit card to go eat sushi, that's bad debt because I got to pay for it. Well, there's two kinds of debt. Now, this is...
And basically to bring this full circle, right? What he's basically talking about as far as good debt and bad debt. So good debt is debt that you're not having to pay for yourself. Good debt is debt in which you're not having to, it's not you having to come out of pocket. This is someone who's basically paying it for you. And if you didn't catch up the last episode that we did yesterday, then go ahead and go back on the channel. And I believe it's I can't remember what it's titled, but go ahead and watch the last episode. All right. I'm going to try to see if we can also leave a link somewhere. Go ahead and watch the last episode as we talk about basically the fractional reserve banking and why it makes much more sense for you to get in business with the banks. But I don't want to go ahead and dive into that. Now, the reason why I'm basically bringing this up is I'm bringing this up for people to understand as to how you choose to spend your money is completely important. Where you choose to invest your money is completely important. Now, most rich people use debt in the sense that they use good debt that other people pay for. Hence the reason why they go into real estate, right? So, which kind of gets me thinking, right? And this is just basically before you even go ahead and get started in real estate investing, right? There's always the there's a dilemma, right? That people go, should I invest in stocks? Or should I invest in real estate, right? That's the biggest thing that's the biggest questions out there. There's stocks people and there's real estate people. And which one is better, right? Because then again, you're thinking in your perspective as to which should I invest in, right? And this is just going to basically narrow down into the points as to what we're going to cover here. And we have Anik Singhal. He's going to go ahead and make a commentary here. Just to take a listen to what he says about people who want to go to stock people versus the real estate people. Take a listen here, guys.
Here's why I'm not investing in the stock market anymore. The benefits just aren't there. I can't do leverage, right? So when I invest in real estate, my money goes a lot further for me. I can use leverage. I can use the bank's money. Number two, where's the tax benefits? If I make a bunch of money in the stock market, I'm going to pay massive tax bills. The other thing is real estate goes up with inflation. It's still a physical asset. Maybe it loses some value, but it still has cash flow and it'll come back. The last but not least is with stocks. You don't get cash flow.
So let's go ahead and summarize here real quick. Before he even goes and talk about into cash flow, he said he's going to have a huge tax bill. The tax bill he's talking about is the capital gains taxes, right? So there's ways in which people in the stock market are able to avoid that. I mean, then again, I'm not a tax professional. I'm not telling you anything about taxes, but there's various tax loopholes for people who are in the stock side of things. But in the real estate side of things, I want you to think about in the real estate, we're going to be talking about how you're able to talk about you're able to use the loopholes that basically the government puts in place legally that you can be able to go ahead and take advantage of to basically limit or reduce your tax bill, right? So let's go ahead and talk about the cash flow side of things that he's
I buy a stock, I have to wait till I sell it one day to get any benefit out of it. But with real estate, every single month, I'm getting paid to own that asset. And the people who are paying me are paying my debt down. To me, when my eyes were opened, stock market was thrown right out of the trash. I just focus on real estate now. Here's why I'm not.
The reason, so a few key nuggets here is talking about basically to make money in Stock market, you have to liquidate. And right, you basically make money. Where most people say, you know what, you make money when you hold the stock. Yes, but for you to actually realize the gains, basically, it's unrealized income, it's unrealized earnings. That's what you get in the stock market. Let's say you have a stock, right? Let's say you have a stock. Let's go back here and share that screen again. And I'm going to go ahead and pick my marker here. Let's say you have a stock that you bought in at 1 grand, right? Now that stock basically rose up to $3,000 in value, which gives you about a $2,000 spread, right? So you have a $2,000 difference in there. Now you might say, yes, I made $2,000, which is my capital gains. I've made 2,000. Now you'll be paying taxes on what you made, obviously, but until for you to actually realize that 2,000, you actually have to liquidate your stocks. What does that mean? That means you actually have to sell it, right? Once you sell it, you don't actually realize the money. So which means it's just basically ones and zeros that you're seeing on a screen. It's just basically numbers that you're basically just looking at. It's just basically numbers that are not, it's not real until you actually sell it, right? Versus real estate, when it comes into real estate, you're not in the same dilemma, because in real estate, you don't have to liquidate to actually see your money. You actually see the money coming in as cash flow, right? You see the money coming in as 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, whatever it is that you're making in net profit. Plus you also, what if you're in the rental unit side of things, if you're renting out apartments, then you're pretty much making money on the back end, because not only are they paying off your debt, your mortgage, which is basically giving you more equity in the house, but you're also getting in some extra money to, hold on to. Now, there's pros and cons into that. We're going to cover that later as we pretty much continue. But that's basically the real estate and the stock side of things. Now, I want you guys to look at the statistics here. So we're going to look at the stats. And the stat number that we want to go ahead and share and look at here is, because I'm very genuinely curious about this. The reason why we talk about stuff like this is because I am genuinely curious. So this is basically talking about the percentage of Americans that own stocks, or basically people that own real estate. So it says, according to latest Gallup, only about 54% of Americans own any stocks for anything. And meanwhile, only about 63% of Americans own real estate, according to the Census Bureau. This is down from a high of about 69% in 2004. So a lot of people are not in the real estate market because, one, it's gotten a little pricier. I mean, there's different factors in there you can factor in. It's pricier. The interest rates to qualify, very crazy. Which, by the way, guys, I'm going to be talking about interest rates, and we're going to be looking at the data as far as how interest rates, the trend over the past, 50 years, how it's basically trended. But not a lot of people going into real estate because, one, it's volatile. Not a lot of people go into real estate because, one, it's a lot more work required in real estate than it is if you go in a stock, because you put in a stock and you're hoping, hey, maybe by tomorrow I might have my money. Maybe by tomorrow, there's more money that's going to come into it. Now, let's talk about it. We're talking about the real estate, guys. If you're a stock person, I'm not trying to convince you that you should go into real estate. If you want to believe in stocks, it's perfectly fine. We're still going to look at a few things, comparisons here. But basically, rather than I want you to think about this is why I personally believe that owning real estate. Okay, I want to talk about something which is very simple. Most people, especially if you're starting out, it's like, real estate has made the most millionaires. Real estate, real estate, real estate, real estate. That's fine. But should you get into real estate as an investor, right? Should you even get into real estate as a real estate agent? Now, here's a commentary that I want you guys to take a listen to as to why I personally, don't necessarily believe that you should get into real estate initially, especially when you're starting out. Real estate, think about it as you're playing chess. Real estate should not be the first move in the game. It should be a move, but not the first move in the game. Now, then again, there's a lot of people that might disagree with me on this, but let's go ahead and take a listen to this here.
I love going head to head with some of my real estate friends, because I'm like, how much money do you have to put down to get $100,000 in cash flow in your pocket a year? And for real estate, you got to have a big down payment and a hefty loan to get 100K. I mean, I read the average single family home rental makes about $600 a month, $400 to $600 a month. The average small business, while it can have a much higher failure rate and there's a lot more work, is going to 10x that if you buy it.
It's interesting because I realized this as my real estate career went on, right? Because when I first got into real estate, everyone and their mom was telling me.
So what she's talking about there, before we go ahead and proceed, what she's talking about there is she's talking about something which is very, very much, she's looking at it as far as a head-to-head comparison there, in the sense as to, she's looking at it from a comparison of, okay, most people get it in and like, all right, I love the idea of real estate. I'm going to put all my money in real estate. But first you have to understand that you need the money to buy the deal, right? You need the money to get into the real estate to begin with. You need the money to actually be able to invest. And if you don't have the capital, you don't have the active cash, then you actually investing in real estate is pretty much, I'd like to say, for lack of a better word, is actually a no-brainer. So what she's talking about there is basically, she's talking about people will actually make more money if you actually start a business, because yes, obviously you might lose money in a business, but when you start a business, you have the potential to make way more money as opposed to the fixed income, right? Because your income real estate is very much fixed. It's fixed. So until your debt's pretty much paid down to a portion which, if you own 100% of the property, then yes, let's say your tenant's paying $1,800 a month. 1,500 goes towards the mortgage. 300 is what's basically what's yours to keep. You're keeping that $300, which is a spread, right? You're keeping the $300 spread. The $1,500 is paying the mortgage. But guess what? Until you raise rent, your income is fixed for that $300 in net profit until you go ahead and acquire more units. So the only way you can increase your income for the most part with real estate is for you to get more units. There's different things you can do, obviously, to go ahead and raise the value, but that's pretty much one of the things in which she was basically talking about there. So let's go ahead and dive back into
properties. You want to own rental properties. I was like, I don't want to make $200 a month. Like, what am I going to do with this? It's not going to change my life.
Exactly.
And so I was like, I have to flip. And so making 20K a month was definitely life changing. And I'm like, this is great. Imagine if I did 5 of these, I can make 100K a month. And sure enough, that was what we did.
I love going.
So he's talking about basically he's commenting on the flip side. I'm not going to talk about the flip side, honestly. I'm not a flipper, so I'm not going to talk to you about flipping, because I think, flipping is a very risque game, but also the only way to make money flipping is if you actually there's multiple ways to make money flipping, but the most sure way that I know people who've made money in flipping, they've made money by actually doing most of the work themselves. When you do most of the work yourself, your overhead costs to start, or your entry level cost is pretty much low. Now, as we kind of continue here, which is very interesting as to, okay, so how do you get your income up? Let's say you don't even want to start a business. Let's say you're like, I need more money, because for most people, rather than you getting obsessed about real estate, the first thing you need to focus on is actually focusing on your income, right? Because you might see that, yes, most millionaires make their money in real estate, but is that how they started? Is that their first source of income? Is that actually how they basically got in the game? Is that how they got into the industry? Now, this is a commentary by Alex Hormozi, and I want you guys to basically take a listen to this here.
Have you ever heard millionaires have 7 income streams? Well, the problem with that quote is that it confuses how they made their money with how they invest their money. And so it would be just like saying, hey, billionaires fly private. You should fly private too to become a billionaire. And so when you want to make the money, you start with one thing, you focus, you go all in. And then once you've made the money, take the money and you spread it out. Because you make a lot of money by taking a lot of risk with a little bit of money, and you keep money by making a little bit of risk with a lot of money. Have you ever heard millionaires?
Oh, his key thing here is, and he makes something which is a very, very good point. Okay. Now, I want you guys to take a listen and pay attention to something which is, I would say, very, very, very interesting there. To get into real estate, to get into anything that requires you, buying any assets, buying properties, any stuff like that, it requires a huge amount of capital. In the sense to the down payment. Let's say you want to buy a $400,000-$500,000 house, and you need 20% down to be able to keep your mortgage payment at a reasonable level, and you're basically putting in 80 G's. You literally need $80,000 to get into a $400,000 property. Hypothetically, you can also put a lower down payment, which lower down payments would also mean that, one, you're basically paying higher on your mortgage, which means over the long term, you're actually going to be it's basically a ripoff, if you ask me. But you need a lot of money to get into the deal. You need a lot of money to buy in, especially if you get into real estate. It's supposed to start a business. You can start it for, a few $100, a few grand. You don't need that much investment. But the thing is, real estate, and also you're not that nimble, because once you're in the property, you're locked in until you can be able to liquidate. So those are the pros. Now we're looking more into the pros and cons of should you or should you not get into the real estate investing side of things, right? Because now on the real estate investing side of things, you're looking more into one. It's not as mobile. You're not as mobile, right? So which means you have to be very right, almost very specific when you pick your deal, because if you pick the wrong deal, you're locked in, you signed, it's yours to keep. If you have the wrong tenants, now you're locked in, they move out, or you have we're going to talk about some more cons of actually real estate investing, so you can see that is it something that you should be doing. One, it's expensive to get in. Okay, there's a lot of money to get in. That's the reason why you got to fix your money. You got to make sure your money is right before you go ahead and say, you know what, I want to go ahead and jump into a real estate deal. Before you go ahead and say, you know what, I want to actually, get into it. Now, this also brings me to the part in which there's a lot of people that believe that say, you know what, I'm going to buy my home, I'm going to buy my house, and when I buy my house, right, better than buy my house, I'm going to, it's going to be mine. It's going to be mine to keep. And this is real estate investing. Is it actually real estate investing though? Is it actually real estate investing? I want you guys to take a look at this. Take a listen to this. Is your house that you're actually buying right now, that house that you own, is it actually you being a real estate investor? Is that you actually being a real estate investor? Let's go ahead and take a listen to this here. That's not the one right here.
Buying a house, worst investment you'll ever make in your entire life. Let's say you paid $1 million for a house. Average house here is 576. 576 is what you pay. Now you need 12% for broker fees. Let's say you keep the house 10 years. You need 10% in maintenance fees. It's 1% a year in maintenance fees. It's about 2% in property taxes every year. That's 20%. 2 times 10 is 20. And it's probably 7% to the bank, so that's 70%. Total those up, it's 112%. $576,000 home will have to be sold for $1.2 million in 10 years. You're not going to sell it for that. To break even, dead money, and you had to put $100,000 down to do this. They're serving a master. They'll borrow money from the Bank of America, and then if they can get some more money, they'll have a little retirement account that funds Wall Street. This is a big game, bro. Rather than buying one house, rent where you live, and take that $100,000 and go buy a piece of real estate where other people live. I just don't need to own a home on the way up. I need to own assets that pay me on the way up. And once I have enough cash flow from the assets, then if I want to go buy a house or a watch or a car, I buy it out of the passive income. Buying a house.
So, okay, this is interesting. This is a very long commentary here. Okay, so there's gonna be a lot of people that disagree and agree with me. Now, it all depends. I'm gonna say this: when you buy your house, are you buying your house for the sake of saying it's an investment? Because I have a lot of people that tell me that they're like, renting sucks. Why are you renting? You're paying somebody else's mortgage. You're doing this, and I'm like, yeah. Well, then again, renting means there's pros to renting and there's cons to renting, right? And then there's also people that advocate for, like, you know what, you buy your house, you own it, it's an asset. I absolutely 100% agree with that camp. So there's two different camps that you're looking at. And what Grant is basically talking about here, Grant is basically talking about when you buy your home, unless you're not trying to make it like your forever home, you're like, hey, I'm just going to stay in here, live in here, and give it to the kids. I don't have anything to do much with financial. Then buying a single family home, which is basically you buying a single door, as opposed to buying a multiple door, which is multiple units, 4, 16, 18, 20 doors, where people can basically, you have multiple rents coming out of each door, which is helping you pay off your mortgage. Unless you're like in that situation where in which you are basically, you have multiple doors, then owning your home, unless it's just like, hey, you know what, hey, hey, honey, I love the home we live in, we're just gonna buy it, we love it, it's somewhere we like, then yes. But I don't think, so there's two camps. So you can buy your home for the perspective of saying, you know what, this is gonna be my forever home, we're gonna give it to the kids, it's perfectly fine. Or you can say, hey, if I'm gonna buy a home as a real estate investment, should you really be doing that though? Now, then again, I'm not a tax professional here, and we're actually going to define how being a real estate professional. We're actually going to define how actually being a real estate professional gives you some tax benefits. But what I just kind of wanted to give an into perspective of, your home is not necessarily an investment most of the time, because the fact is you don't own the home. Let's be honest with each other. The bank owns the home. The bank has the deed. The bank owns the home. Because you miss more than 3 payments, then your house is liable, possible, might go for foreclosure. Right? Because if it can be taken from you at any point in time, it's the same way as you renting, and your landlord can evict you at any point in time for missing 3 payments. It's still the same thing. The only difference is you're playing the bank's game. The only difference is you're playing the bank's game. It's the bank's game, not your game, right? So you got to understand, you got to think of the perspective as to, is your home actual investment? That is honestly up to you to decide. That's honestly up to you to think is. But according to Grant, that's not necessarily an investment, right? Now, one thing I want to talk about here is I'm going to talk about, the pros and cons of actually real estate investing. There's a pros and cons. We're going to talk about the pros and cons of real estate investing, right? And for this, we're going to kind of go into, what are the advantages of real estate investing? So we have advantages. Real estate can be purchased at below market prices. So like, for instance, if you purchased your home in 2008 and you're selling it now, I mean, you're probably making a 200 to 300% spread, right? Because if you purchased your home for 20, 40, 60, maybe even 80 grand, and that house is going for 320 now, that's insane value if you look at it over a 12 to 13 year period, because obviously you're making money from a house. That's perfectly fine. That's an appreciating asset. That's good. Now, also, you got to think about it. If you're purchasing your home and you're purchasing your home in a location in which I just realized I'm not sharing my screen. So, and you're purchasing your home in a location in which the location that you're purchasing your home in is actually a place in which it's an up and coming neighborhood, then yes, that absolutely makes sense. But if you're in a location where you're purchasing your home, wherever it is that you're purchasing your home is, like, let's say in the not so nice neighborhoods, then you're actually purchasing a depreciating asset. Now, real estate generates steady cash inflows, right? So this is what they were talking about, is in the steady cash inflows is you get it in the steady cash inflows in the sense as to the steady cash inflows is coming from the fact as to you have your tenants constantly paying your rent. And when you have your tenants constantly paying your rent, that is basically giving you extra money in your pocket. Yes, it's maybe $300, $400, $500. But yes, if you look at it over a 4-year break-even point, the reason why I say it's a 4-year break-even point is I want you to take a listen to this and take a look at this. If it costs me, let's say, my tenants are paying in, what's a good number to put it? Let's say we have $2,000 a month is what I'm charging. Let's say it's two grand a month is basically what's been charged on the rent, and I put in an $80,000 down to buy a $400,000 home. So 80,000 buy a $400,000 home. So I have a $400,000 home that I put $80,000 down in. So basically, I'm in the whole $80,000. So now I need to recoup my money. So now, how long is it going to take me to recoup my money? Not even just recoup my money. The way you recoup your money is basically in equity, right? So how long is it going to be for me to have $80,000 worth of equity in the home, right? That's how you're recouping your money in the census. You're recouping your money in equity. So how are you going to recoup your money in equity? So let's look at it from a perspective of, okay, if we're putting 2,000, right? And over a 12-month period, we're looking at 24,000, right? So 24,000 is what I'm making on a annual income. That's an annual equity that's being built, right? So over basically a 4-year span, I would be looking at $96,000 would be what I'll be looking at roughly. So I would say it'll be about 3.4 to 3.6 years will be how long it's going to take for me to get my 80,000 in equity. But if we look at it from a simplistic perspective, in an 8-year time frame, in a 4-year time frame, actually, in a 4-year time frame, 4 years, I'll be able to basically have recouped my income. I'll be able to recoup how much money I put in. Now, everything else that comes in now is like my 80 grand. I've already taken it in. Now I'm just basically playing with the bank's money. So that's all pretty much fine. Well, now that is a benefit of you actually having rental units, right? Now, but the beauty of it is that 80,000 or 96,000 was not paid in by you. That 80,000, 96,000, the 96,000, if you have tenants you rent into, was paid in by your tenants. Let's say you have 2 tenants, right? Let's say that was paid in by your 2 tenants, right? So basically you recoup your 80,000. But if I paid the 400,000 for the home, right? I paid 400,000 for the home, in which I put $80,000 down, right? I put $80,000 down into the home, right? To basically buy the deal, to basically purchase the deal. Now that's my money. And every month that I'm making a mortgage payment of, 2,000, that is me putting in more money into the deal. Do you understand? So I always say I operate off the concept of the monopoly concept, which is basically the 4 houses and a hotel. Okay. Which means I recommend you to have 4 Airbnb properties or 4 rental units. And then the last house that you live in should be the house in which it is your, your tenants who basically from your 4 houses who basically pay for your house that you live in, which is quote unquote, I like to say is your hotel. Right now, then again, so we're looking at those are the pros. So we have another one is real estate provides a depreciation tax shield. So the depreciation tax shield is something which we're going to cover. And for the depreciation tax shield, I want to go ahead and cover what is the depreciation by basically sharing a video. There's a video I want you guys to I want you guys to take a listen to, because today actually I just realized that the topic of real estate is actually a very, very, very long topic, but we're going to actually go ahead and keep it a little bit shorter because we only have an hour of time to burn here. So let's go ahead and talk about this here. I want to talk about what is real estate depreciation.
You could potentially qualify for the real estate depreciation deduction just by turning any property into an investment property. Criteria to qualify for real estate depreciation is as follows. Number 1, you must own the investment property and not be renting or borrowing it from someone else. Number 2, you must use the property to produce income by renting it. Number 3, the property must have a useful life, and after which point depreciation would render it useless. And number 4, this deduction is known as the depreciation deduction. So if you're a real estate investor, you could potentially qualify for the real estate depreciation deduction. And I want you to know why it's so important. You could potentially qualify for the real estate depreciation deduction just by turning any property into an investment property. Criteria to qualify for real estate depreciation is as follows.
So he's just basically repeating himself. He repeated himself there, but let's kind of go ahead and toggle back in here. And let's go ahead and toggle back in here. You guys will see my notes that I'm kind of reading. Those are my notes there for a bit, but this is where I want to kind of get into. So the real estate is depreciation. So the depreciation expense here, as we're looking at it for the most part, depreciation expense that can be claimed on a real estate investment involves no cash outflow, and yet reduces the amount of taxable income, thereby shielding you from a portion of the taxes that would otherwise be due. Currently, the depreciation period for residential real estate is 27.5 years, while the depreciation period for the commercial building is 39 years, which means you can depreciate. Basically, you take the total value of the house for over 27.5 years, so you can basically write it off. Okay, so what that means is it gives you the ability to write it off on your tax bill, which pretty much gives you a tax loophole. Go ahead and look up if you are in a real estate if you're a real estate investor, I highly recommend that you go ahead and check it out. Take a listen to that. Real estate appreciates in value. That's another pros there. Real estate provides an inflationary hedge. Yes, it kind of does, because it kind of does, because one, you're dealing with a tangible asset that is not a fiat currency, right? So which means if the government goes ahead and prints more $2 trillion worth of stimulus, it doesn't necessarily, even though it overstimulates and overinflates the economy, what it ends up doing is basically now people have this huge inflow of cash. Because they have so much cash, now what are they going to do? They're going to go ahead and offer. They have more purchasing power. So because they're going to have more purchasing power, they raise the value of almost everything, which means your property actually goes up in value because somebody's willing to pay more money because they have more free cash, right? So that's why I recommend you guys go check the previous what do you call it? The previous live that I did yesterday, and we were talking about basically how the fiat currency and how basically the fractional reserve banking and how basically money is just a promissory note. It's not real. We're just basically backing it up of confidence, right? And it's more or less, I'll say, it's backing up of the military power of the United States. So real estate financing creates leverage benefits, right? So it gives you the ability to leverage. So basically, let's look at this. So real estate is usually purchased with the assistance of a substantial mortgage, typically in the range of 70 to 80% of the purchase price, because you're financing, so you put in 20% down. This means that any returns from the property are magnified by the amount of this debt. For example, if you use a $50,000 down payment to acquire $300,000 property and then earn $25,000 per year from it, you've generated 50% of your. So basically, that's sort of been covered, right? Real estate defers taxes, right? So it says here that you don't pay income taxes on any increases in the value of the property until you sell it, which is basically called capital gains taxes. But here's an increase. There's also an interesting thing as to there are loopholes in which people can actually do, and those loopholes are basically what's called the 1031 exchange. So the 1031 exchange, I don't want to explain it, because I think if I explain the 1031 exchange, it's gonna be like, dude, what are you talking about, right? So I want you guys to take a listen to what this guy talks about. What is the 1031 exchange here? So we're gonna go ahead and listen to what is the 1031 exchange. Okay.
Dude, I'm selling this rental property. I'm gonna make $100,000 just by holding it for 2 years. Okay, but it looks like you'd owe $20,000 in capital gains tax on that. Oh, no, I'm not paying any taxes on that. What do you mean? Do you want to go to jail? No, I just mean I'm doing a 1031 tax deferred exchange. As long as I identify the property that I'm going to buy within 45 days and then close on it within 180, I don't have to pay any capital gains tax. If I just keep doing this with bigger and bigger properties, making more and more cash flow, I won't have to owe the IRS any tax dollars. Dude, that's crazy smart. I gotta follow you to learn more.
Okay, so what he's basically talking about there, which is also very interesting, is in the 1031 exchange. I kind of want to bring this full circle, bring this to me. So basically talking about tax deferred, how you can basically tax deferred, and you have 45 and 180-day rule, right? So all that's saying is, imagine you bought a house or property in 2008 for $80,000, right? You bought that property in 2008 for $80,000, and now that property is worth $300,000. So the spread on that is $220,000. So you have a $220,000 spread on that property, right? So there's a $220,000 spread. So with the $220,000 spread, if you were to basically sell the property and basically identify new property to take that money that you sold or whatever it is that you made and reinvest in that property and close on the deal within 180 days, you now basically have to pay taxes on the $220,000 spread, because that's a capital gains. So depends on that income. I mean, it could range anywhere, depends on where you are. You could be paying anything from a I can't remember what the numbers are, but capital gains tax, maybe a few tens of thousands of dollars. That's what you're going to be paying. I mean, let's even look at it. The capital gains, how much is capital gains tax? So all varies. So you're looking about anything from could be anything from 15 to 20%. So if you had 15 to 20%, I mean 15% of 220 is, you're looking at roughly about 22 plus that, you're looking at about 33,000, roughly about 33,000 on a $220,000 sale. But with a 1031 exchange, you're able to pretty much mitigate that. You're pretty much able to avoid having to pay that much extra. So that's basically the real estate, the first tax system. So real estate income gradually increases. So basically, real estate income gradually increases because if it is possible to increase the rental rates at the rate of inflation, then your income gradually increases. Since the fixed rate mortgage Being paid off does not increase the rate of inflation. That's just something else. Real estate allows for active investment control. You do. Now, here's a disadvantage of real estate. It's not easy. It is not easy. It is not easy to get into real estate and start making money from it. Okay, that's very more important for you to keep. I want you to keep that in the back of your mind, because a lot of people believe I'm going to buy a house, buy a property, and get into it, and all of a sudden, boom, millionaire. I'm like, millionaire? No, that's not how it works, right? There's step-by-step in this processes to the game, right? Number two is the real estate income can be variable. The income can be variable because you may lose money in some periods. Let's say you're renting your property and you're taking $1,800 in rent, $300 is yours to keep. Your tenant calls you and says, hey, the water just broke or something just broke, and it's a $900 fix. Now you have to come out of pocket the extra $600 because I know we're going to get a little technical here, guys. We got $1,800 in rental, right? Out of which $300 is ours to keep. This is our profit because $1,500 goes to the bank. So now, and then they say that you have a $900 worth of damage. So you minus your 900 brings you your negative $600 that you're basically having to come out of pocket. That's just basic math there, right? So that's another con of actually being in real estate, right? That's actually another con of you actually having your own, rental unit, your own real estate rental unit, right? It requires maintenance. That's something we already covered. Real estate is impacted by rent control. Now, what does rent control mean? That means that some states, especially depends on where you are, has areas. I don't know if New York and California do, but I know they do have laws that you cannot evict a tenant. But you're impacted by rent control in a sense as to rent control is in the play of you can't raise rents. You're capped. You're capped at a specific point. You can't raise rents. Now that's more or less benefiting to the renter. But let's say your property taxes are crazy or insane, but it still doesn't matter because you still can't raise the rent, right? So because of rent control. So that's another con there when you're actually talking about the real estate rental unit side of things. All right. Another one that we have here is real estate requires your time, which means most people think it's passive income. I'm going to be real estate and have passive income. That's not true. It's not passive. The whole concept of passive, I don't know where the word passive comes in, but a lot of people have this notion of, oh yeah, man, it's passive income. I'm going to just be passive. I'm going to just invest, a few grand here and there, I'll be good. It's not passive, my friend. Real estate is not, there's nothing about real estate that is passive. If that's something you want to do as a passive income, I recommend you do something else. But it takes time to build that. It's not passive income. It's recurring income, recurring revenue. It's like what people do in the software as a service business where you have a recurring subscription. That's basically the same deal. So real estate transaction costs are high. To get in, it's expensive to buy in. It's an expensive game to play. Okay. Now, real estate income is subject to taxation. We already spoke about that. Real estate values can decline. Yes, real estate rents can decline. That's true. And you can also have a tenant just moves out. If a tenant moves out, what are you going to do then? What are you going to do? Real estate leverage effects can be negative. Okay, so the leverage effect already noted as an advantage of investing in real estate can also be a disadvantage. Magnifying your losses. To return to the earlier example, using $50,000 down payments require $20,000 rent property. What are the results? 25,000 per loss. You have generated 50. Okay, so what is just saying? It's basically saying there could be in a point in which let's say you have a tenant that moves out. And you gotta, if you have a single family home, your tenant moves out. What are you gonna do? Right? You're still stuck with the mortgage payments. The banks don't care if you're renting it out. The banks just care. You still gotta make your payments. Right? And real estate's not liquid. It's not as liquid as stocks because stocks are nimble. Stocks are you have the ability to move in between the stock market, go here and there. You have the ability to kind of pick and choose where you want to kind of dabble in. You have the ability to kind of pick and choose what makes the most sense to you, what makes the most sense to you to invest in. So that in its own is pretty much another thing about real estate is pretty much very much not liquid. Okay, so now as we kind of go ahead and continue on here, which is a fascinating thing for me is, so if you're like, okay, where should I put my money in then? If real estate is volatile, is in a sense it's not liquid, there's cons to it, and then there's the stock market. Before we continue on real estate, I think you guys need to take a listen to this. What Alex says.
So if you're under 30 and you're not making the amount of money that you want to make, instead of taking the excess cash you have and putting it into the S&P 500, I want you to put it into the S&Me 500. Take that $500 every single month and you plow it into you. You plow it into buying the skills that you need to learn how to market, how to sell, how to build products, how to get your name out there, how to brand, how to make content, all of those things that you need to learn. In a weekend, you can triple your earning income. Whereas if you take that $500 and try and plow it to earn 10% every year, it won't matter. So if you're
so that on its own is the game changer there, guys. Is it's better to invest in yourself get the skill sets, make the money, invest in yourself, as opposed to I'm going to take that money and I'm going to take the money that I've invested and or the little money that I have, and I'm going to go ahead and put that $500 in a stock. What about if you lose it? You can't afford to lose it. It's better to invest in a skill set, invest it in yourself. The best investment you can ever make, it doesn't matter whatever product it is, the best investment you can ever make is an investment in yourself, in yours truly. Now, as we kind of dive deeper into real estate, as we kind of dive deeper into, the ins and out of real estate, we've kind of covered the pros and cons of real estate. And we spoke about should not buy a home. Now, another thing is as to there's a lot of people that's like, hey, what about if I'm just in the renting space, right? I want you guys to take a listen to this. Is because most renters get a lot of flack. Most renters like, oh, why are you renting? Why you always renting? You a renter? Why are you renting? You should own a home.
Owning a house and buying a house and taking out a mortgage and taking on debt ain't all that it's cracked up to be. The Realtor Association of the world has done a great job of saying renting is throwing away money, because that's what the American dream was 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Buy a house, 2-car garage, picket fence, 2.2 kids. That's what the American dream is. The American dream today is economic freedom. Pick and choose wherever the hell you want to go. Keep it moving and stay flexible and keep your overhead low. So what people forget is that, all right, that if you're going to buy a place, first thing you're going to look at is the mortgage payment, right? So typically, the last 6 months, it's gone from 3% to 6%. That's double. I'm not a mathematician, but I'm pretty sure 3 to 6 is double.
Good.
But the three things that people forget about when they go to buy a house, and for those of us that have bought a house, they get it now. Those of us that have not is what I call the big three expenses. That's your taxes, your maintenance, and your insurance. Those are three things you do not have to pay for if you're renting. Owning a house and buying a house.
He's just basically giving you guys the pros and cons. He's giving you the pros and cons of, if you were to get into the space of like, I want to rent, right? It's to the renters. It's to, you don't have the liability that a lot of the owners do, right? And that's just the pros and cons that comes into owning a house. Is if you're not ready to fix it, if you're not ready to get your hands dirty, what happens if the roof is leaking? You're responsible for that, right? Now, those are things in which I want you guys to kind of have a full spectrum as to things to pay attention to when it comes into basically the rental side of things, when it comes to the home ownership side of things, because I think the home ownership side of things is something that's propped up to be. Now, another thing, which is, let's say you're like, hey, I want to buy, I have all cash. I want to go ahead, because there's a lot of people that don't believe in debt. That's fine. I mean, then again, there's multiple camps. I personally believe in some areas in which I don't like to have debt. Right, because then again, it's unless you're in a point in which the debt is paying for itself, then just having it on its own is just useless, right? It's a useless debt, right? As we covered in the earlier beginnings of the video. But basically, this
buying a house all with cash to me is ridiculous.
If you gave me $700,000 and said, "Hey, go buy a house with it," I'd be like, "Do you want to give me the $700,000? I'll do whatever I want with it." If you gave me a house worth $700,000, I'd sell it for $600,000 the same day, get my $600,000, and I'm gonna take my $600,000. I'm gonna go buy $2.4 million worth of real estate that pays the debt down in 30 years, and it'll probably be worth $7 or $8 or $9 or $10 million. I'm not gonna even be around 30 years from now. My kids wake up.
So what he's basically saying is most people take that $600,000 cash and then they go buy a house for $600,000. Right, which if you have $600,000 cash, then that's good. But in his situation, what he's kind of describing and explaining is in the sense that rather than put in that $600,000 cash, use the $600,000 as a down payment to get a bigger property that you can basically rent to someone else that will help you pay down and gain some more equity. And then over the appreciation, we talk about it as to the appreciation of the property. Now you can go ahead and liquidate the asset. Now, does that work for everybody? Is that advice I'll give to everyone? Absolutely not. No, I don't think everyone should do that. But I think then again, depends on your financial situation and also depends on your level of risk tolerance. Some people are not tolerating risk. Some people are not willing to be patient enough. And if you're not willing to be patient enough, then that's something that's not for you. If you are willing to be patient enough, then that's something that I would recommend that, you kind of do your due diligence in. I'm not giving real estate advice, but that's something you basically do your due diligence in. Now, as we basically, let's go ahead and wrap up.
30 years from now, they got a $10 million piece of property paid for that's paying $3,000 or $4,000 a month or $5,000 a month. No telling what the rent's going to be in 30 years.
Buying a house all with cash to me is ridiculous.
This is one more thing which I want you guys to take a listen to here, and this is another commentary, and this is going to kind of segue into the next one I want to kind of make into. A lot of people just cannot afford. What about if you're in a camp? Most people cannot afford to buy a home, right? That's why most people are turning into renters, right? There's a rent. Most people watching this cannot even afford to invest in a property, right? Now, I want you guys to take a listen to this commentary here.
It's probably the scariest recession we'll have. $400,000 mortgage in January was $1,700. Today, that same loan is going to be $3,700. It's exploded, man, almost 3 times. $3,700 before the PMI, which they're going to force on you, before HOA fees, which they probably have here, before maintenance, etc. Right? What's going to happen is this price is going to come down. The mortgage doesn't come down, but rents are going to explode. They quit printing paper. Now they're going to manufacture renters in America.
Yeah.
I knew we were going to become a renter nation. I didn't know that they were going to like
force us into it.
It doesn't make money. It doesn't help people. It doesn't bring down the cost of food. It won't bring down the cost of petroleum. It's going to kill the auto industry. This is probably the scariest recession.
So then again, he's just talking about this. I can't comment on it for a recession or not. I'm not like, like I said, not really a, giving that kind of advice. I don't want that kind of slack right now. But for the most part, there is what he's basically talking about. Okay, what he's basically talking about for you real estate guys out there, for everyone there is understanding that most it's insane when you look at the current interest rate, right? And which kind of brings me into what is the interest rate, and what has been the trend. What has been the historic trend of interest rates? I want you guys to, we're going to kind of take a look at this as the historic mortgage rates. Okay, what has the mortgage rates been like? And the reason why it's kind of expensive, because most people don't purchase a home. Most people are basically purchasing the interest rates, right? So it's basically looking at 1970s to 2000. So in the 1970s, let me get a more data. So, which is actually interesting. Most people didn't actually notice that as of in the peak highest interest rate was in 1981, and the interest rate was 16.64%. So, which means the interest rate actually historically has been in a high of 6%, right? It's been in a high. It's been in the, but then again, the average property value as of 1970 wasn't 350,000, right? Because I want you guys to see what would the average property value in 1970 was. Let me get those numbers for you. And this is also something I'm very interesting. The average property value, and this is basically this is we're going to kind of run into the data here. Look at the numbers. Let's make sure we got the screen. This part of the screen sharing here. So as in 1970, the average property value in the U.S. was about the U.S. average houses actually sold for 1970 was about 26,000. So in 26,000, if you had a 16% interest rate, that's not bad, right? So that's 26,000 was the average property value. Okay, so 7% interest rate back then wasn't bad because 26,000. Now you factor in 2001, this is going up into the year 2000s, and then we can obviously where it's at right now. Now in the year 2000s, this is basically a 30-year difference. You have 192,000. 30-year difference. It almost I don't even know how many percent it go, but it's more than 10x basically. It's almost 9x or 8x what it used to be at 26,000. Now it's at 192,000, 2,000. Now this has been 2023, so now the average property value you're looking at 300 to 400,000. So which means it's also super insane when you're now looking at it from the historic trend as to what the mortgage rates were. So now which means a 7% mortgage rate in the 1970s or 16% was not that bad if you're paying $26,000 house. But if you're looking at what the data was in 2022 at 4%, now people are saying 6%. It all depends. 7%. It all depends on where you are and what your lenders are getting. What you're getting and what the Fed decide to do. But if you're looking at a 6 to 7%, that the average cost of your interest rate alone, on a 30 to 15 can make or break how much you pay. Because if you look at it from a perspective of, I want you guys to take a look at this numbers here. If you look at it from a perspective of how much you're going to pay in interest, so let's say you have a 30-year loan on a 5.27% interest rate that you're paying off a $400,000 loan amount, you're going to end up paying in interest $396,958. So take a listen to this. You're going to pay total to the bank $800,000. $400,000 is in interest. Okay, that is basically one of the reasons why most people were in a renter's economy. Because then again, think about it. Interest rates are crazy, and most people don't buy. They don't go, oh wow, it's a $400,000 loan. They're like, how much can I afford a month? So you're paying for the mortgage payments. And if you're paying over a 30-year span, you have a $400,000 house, and you're actually paying double, which means you're paying $800,000. That to me is crazy, and that's another reason why we're kind of trending into a renter's economy. And the reason why we're trending into a renter's economy is because just most people just can't afford it. Most people just can't afford it. It's getting to the point where it's almost becoming very, very, very. It's getting crazy. And now the crazy thing is, if the Feds keep increasing interest rate, it's just going to get even crazy. Here's an example of basically how much a 1% difference in interest rates make. Okay, so as you see in the table below, a 1% difference between a $200,000 home with a $106,000 home mortgage increase your monthly payments by almost $100, right? Which is different. Although the difference in monthly payments may not seem extreme, but over a basically 30 years, you're paying them an extra 30 grand. An extra 1% can lead to you paying literally almost one third, or 0.25% in total of the total amount of that you're financing for over a 30-year span, right? Because 10% of 200,000 is 20 grand. So basically an extra almost 12 to 15% is what you're paying extra over a 30-year time frame. Just an extra 1%. That's just the difference of 1%. So which means if it goes to a 6% interest rate or 7% interest rate, now you're paying up 40 extra. Now, instead of you paying back 396 as of a previous example, you're probably going to be paying 440, 450, right? So that's why most people just can't afford to be in a home. That's why we're pretty much leaning and living in a renters economy, because there's what else is there to do, right? So basically, another stats which is very interesting to me that I kind of wanted to share with you guys is real estate for the most part has made a lot of millionaires. Okay, and actually, according to some 2023 data, is most millionaires about basically makes about 40% of a typical millionaire's net worth. Okay, so most millionaires, wherever they are, if you're in a 7-figure, it usually makes up about a 40% of a typical millionaire's net worth. How insane is that to think about? And the fact is, most people's portfolio, if you look at what they hold, about 40%, and there's about 21.95 million. So there's about 22 million Americans that are making over 7 figures or more. Okay, 7 figures or more. That's about 8% of the population. 7 to 8% of the population are in the 7-figure range, right? So not a lot of people are in the 7-figure range who are watching this. Some of you might be in the 7-figure range who's watching this. That's good for you. You're in the top 7, top 8%. If you're in the top 7, making that much money and an annual, and then we're talking about an annual basis, not in a one time, did like a crypto pump or something like that, and you made the money on a one-time basis. Now, which is very interesting as to, let's say you're in that percentage and you're making that much money, right? If you're making $1 million a year and then you're paying taxes, your taxes, it depends, could be anything from 20 to 37%. And if you're paying 370 grand in taxes a year, that to me is crazy, because if you worked your ass off, you worked really hard and you made 37 million, and then all of a sudden, boom, a million, all of a sudden you have to give up 300 grand. I can't assume that I would be excessively smiling about that, which kind of brings me into this as to, a few millionaires, a few people, they basically come up with little loopholes and secrets and ways, which we've covered a few of them in the beginning of the podcast, not the podcast, in the beginning of the live, in which you can start it from the beginning, guys, and kind of catch up to, so you don't miss what we're talking about here. But here's 5 secrets real estate millionaires use to never pay taxes.
Real estate millionaires use these 5 tricks to never pay taxes. The first is rental income, and technically you're supposed to pay taxes on this, but the IRS loves landlords, so they allow something called depreciation, which is basically an imaginary loss on your rental property that offsets the rental income. The second's a 1031 exchange, which is how I bought this property with tax-free money. I bought and repaired this duplex for 40 grand a year ago.
So we've covered basically rental income. We've basically covered the 1031 exchange, how you can depreciate that.
When a 1031 exchange allowed me to sell it for 125 tax-free as long as I use the profits for another building. The third is debt, and since the IRS doesn't recognize a loan as taxable.
Now, here's the thing. Remember, yesterday, for those of you who caught yesterday's live, was we basically spoke about how the debt, whenever you take a loan out, loans are not taxed. FYI, for those of you who are out there, whenever you take a loan out, loans aren't taxed. Loans are a way in which people actually use to move money around and not actually get taxed on it. So he's covered a few loopholes from the income to the 1031 exchange, and now basically talking about the loan
this
side.
apartment building this year and got a $450,000 check without having to pay the man a buck. Number 4 is opportunity zones. I got this 3-plex in an IRS designated opportunity zone for 25 grand 3 years ago, and it's already worth 175. But if I wait 10 years to sell it, it's exempt from capital gains. The fifth and appropriately final way is to die with your rental properties. Your heirs will get a stepped up basis, which means they can sell it for what it's.
So the last two, honestly, I can't comment on because I'm not familiar on that. But the first two basically spoke about it. Now there's another thing as well, which is very interesting, and a lot of people don't necessarily, pay attention to. by the way, which is basically the work hour loophole, right? Which is the work hour, another loophole that people basically use when it comes to the real estate side of things. Now, this is the work hour loophole. We're coming towards the end of the podcast. No, I keep saying podcast, which by the way, we're going to be having awesome, amazing guests soon. The podcast is going to be coming, and it's going to be coming in live. We're going to be dropping hot and ready episodes. Okay, but let's go ahead and kind of.
So the law requires that you have to spend 750 hours managing your rental property in the year, and you have to show that you're spending at least half of your time in real estate more than any other thing, which is too hard for many taxpayers to do.
So the 750, the 750 hour rule that is basically to qualify you as a real estate professional, right? So basically, this is just to basically say that you are a real estate professional, basically, which basically states, if you look at this article here, you must spend more than 750 hours participating in real estate business activities during the tax year for you to qualify for the, if you're trying to deduct whatever your rental income is. This can include the time spent acquiring or improving rental properties, managing rental property portfolios, and advertising for more tenants. So if you want to qualify for that, then you basically have to, to qualify for the loophole, the tax loophole, then you basically have to do that.
Unless you're a real estate agent, a real estate broker.
Show that.
Yeah, exactly. How do you show that? You have to have a real estate professional log booklet, which is something you can download offline and log your time.
What?
Now, let's just say you don't have the time to show the government that you're spending more time in real estate than your Amazon business or your day trading or any other profession that you might have. You can run a short-term rental business as long as you're renting out a property short-term, like an Airbnb, for an average period of 7 days or less. You can have a property that you can claim rental losses on. And I have a lot of W-2 and 1099 taxpayers who are now buying Airbnb properties and leveraging this strategy as a loophole around the passive activity loss rules that were created in 1987. So the law...
Basically, you could do research into this. I'm not going to comment on this because then again, I'm not a real estate tax advisor or anything. But then again, I just kind of wanted to bring that to light so you get basically see, what is out there for you. And at the end of the day is, this is for you, right? This is basically for you to basically be able to do your research, for you to be able to, go out there and see, can you actually go out there and make it, right? You shouldn't. I don't want people to believe like, what, I can't make it. I'm a man, I can't make it. I'm a woman, I can't make it. I'm Hispanic and black and whatever it is that you're saying. It doesn't matter whatever it is, whatever you set your goal as, you can actually accomplish it, right? There's nothing that is beyond you. And I wanted to go ahead and share the statistic by Zipper. I think this is Zippia. I believe this is Zippia, the career expert, which is basically sharing you some. This is just some interesting stats and some interesting data as far as the demographic and statistics in the U.S. of real estate investors, right? So most of your investors are 68% male and 31% female, and obviously as your stats continue here, you can see about the income, the income there, and then obviously you can see the real estate investor generation by year. It still pretty much balances out, from 2010 to 2021. As you can see here, the margins are basically balancing out. So at the end of the day, there's nothing limiting you from actually climbing up to the top. There's nothing stopping you from getting to the point in which you can be one of those investors that are in this stats in which you have your own properties, you have your own assets, you have whatever it is that you are looking to do. Now, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Go ahead and leave a comment. Let me know what you think about this. This is pretty much where we're going to end the live. And tomorrow's topic, just to kind of give you guys, we're going to be talking about, this is going to be interesting. I'm going to see if I can talk about either offshore banking, which is crazy, or we're talking about, credit, right? How rich people use credit versus poor credit, how to manage credit card, what credit card to get. And we're going to basically use this stuff to talk about credits to kind of see how, you can raise the value and become a better, more productive individual and a better member of society. And obviously, as you guys know, I always say it every single time, and I'm going to say it again. And